Ladies and
Over to
gentlemen,
you.
yeah, I always start. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It's nice to have you once again on the Pan African Half Hour Show with Mr. President J. Adewole. We normally talk about Africa here because Africa is our business and we are Africans and we like to, discuss about the situations that are prevailing on the continent. And this week or recently, we've seen a rise of xenophobic attack against fellow Africans in South Africa. And as I said, as Africans, and Africa is our business, it's a matter that concerns us, especially at the African Coalition for Development. And that's why today we're having Mr. President J. Adewole to talk about this prevailing situation in South Africa. Why are we reaching this level of such type of actions with xenophobic acts that are being conducted, attacking fellow Africans in the street of Johannesburg? I was watching the news earlier this morning. I saw that two fellow Africans were killed by two South Africans in South Africa with guns. Going to a turning point, it's becoming dangerous, Mr. President. How do you perceive all this? What do you have to say about all this situation and everything that is prevailing regarding this xenophobic attack that are, of course, unacceptable?
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on the show. It's always very, very great to have conversation with you, especially when it comes to the greatness of Africa and the strategy behind moving the continent to the greater beyond, I would say. So let me begin by saying this clearly. Phobia against fellow African is not just a South African issue, all right? So
Yeah.
it's more than that. It's an African wound that's been in-depthly built into our minds, right? When a Ghanaian or a Nigerian or maybe a Congolese or Zimbabwean or Mozambican or even Zambian or Ethiopian or any African is attacked simply because they are foreigners. We are not just attacking the person. We are attacking the very idea of African unity. That's one thing I want us to know. And whoever is doing that, promoting this xenophobia in South Africa, we need to understand that we are attacking the idea of African unity. And that's one thing Julius Malema was preaching. And I want you to know today that the pain is deeper because South Africa's freedom was not won by South Africans alone. So that's why it's deeper.
It was not won by South Africa.
Carried by the sacrifices, advocacy, money, diplomacy, and solidarity of many African nations. I can remember, though I was young, that Nigerians were saving money in taxes to support the ANC movement in South Africa. There was a tax that they were collecting from every Nigerian.
Wow.
So when Africans are now treated as a stranger or strangers on an African soil, we must pause and ask ourselves, have we forgotten our own history? When it's easier for an American passport holder to move across the continent than for an African passport holder to move across the same continent, then there's a problem. And it's a big problem.
Yeah.
That's just my take for now.
Well, I think that's a great insight. I think it goes back to a lot of cultural issues that have affected or impeded the African continent. We also have the colonial heritage. Don't you think that's where the origin of everything, every confusion we have currently in Africa originated from that particular moment? Because we've never had this type of borders. Who decided that South Africa belongs to South Africa? To the Zulu nation and stuff, who decided that South Africans are now be called South Africans. But before being South Africans, they are Africans. You know, We used to have our own kingdoms, our own organizations, but the Berlin Conference compromised everything and changed the course of Africa to make it an economic project. And up to date, we inherited those type of institutions, those countries. They divided populations that used to be brothers. Look at the Congo. You know, that's the people who are fighting the DRC, Rwandans and stuff. Rwanda used to be part of the DRC at a certain point.
Yeah.
It used to be called Congo, Rwanda, Burundi. Even Burundi used to be part of the DRC. So who'd say that these people are foreigners? These people are not foreigners and stuff. So we have a huge colonial heritage here that is being manifested today in terms of grievances, especially in South Africa, where Black people feel like uh, they, they, their economic opportunities are being stolen by certain foreign they've created in their head. But no one is foreign in Africa. I'm proudly saying it, and I've always said it. No one, you can be a foreign in Africa. Tell me a single Africans who attended the Berlin conference to decided that you guy, because you come from this part of Africa, you are now foreign on this land. No, this never existed.
Of course.
Yeah, so these xenophobic behaviors that are being manifested in South Africa, they are indeed condemnable, but we must study them culturally, historically, as well as economically, because they are driven by an economic motive. They say that, okay, people are taking our opportunities. Is it true that people are taking opportunities of Black South Africans? I don't think it's accurate. Look at Kolwezi. We have many South Africans that work in the mining industry, in the DRC, in Lualaba, many. Thousands and thousands of them, but no one has ever bothered to disturb them because that's the system we chose, capitalism. You know, the people who fit in the markets, the people who are much more bold and smarter are able to take on jobs. Nigerians are dynamic. He travels all the way from Nigeria to go to South Africa and start a business and make business. You, as a South African, you don't have the courage to start a business in your own country because you are trained differently with a different type of mentality. And then you start condemning the guy who is a hustler, who think differently and who think beyond country. South Africans should become open-minded. They have to think beyond South Africa. They don't visit Africa. That's why they have that type of mentality. Most of them, they were educated in a way that they protect the interests of the aggressor, the real oppressor who control their meaning of production and economic productivity, the white guy. Because South Africa is not owned by South Africans. It's owned by the white men. They control all the meaning of production. Look at the biggest moguls in South Africa, the richest people in South Africa. All they're white guys. The businesses, the companies, they are owned by these guys. And then at the same time, they're acting as if they are protecting those interests that do not even belong to them and chasing an African hustler who decided to pursue his dream on the African continent. That's being retarded. They are retarded, and they have to change that type of mindset. South African leadership should also play a role to educate their population. No foreigner is going to South Africa to take on jobs, to resort to a level where they start killing other Africans. That's what we call self-hate, and it's a manifestation of stupidity.
Manifestation of stupidity. And I agree with you in everything you spoke about, especially when you spoke about colonialism. You know, what I used to tell people, you know, they often talk about colonialism as taking of lands or taking of area of Africa, but I don't believe it's taking of land. I believe it's reprogrammed the identity of the people. So meaning, you know, looking at xenophobia, let me just touch in that how it relate to, you know, what the colonialists did. Because one of the things we must understand is that xenophobia in Africa did not appear from nowhere. It didn't just come like abacadabra. It's connected to the colonial project itself. Colonialism did not only take African lands, you know, mineral, labor, and resources. Just like I said earlier, it attacked the African identity because before colonial borders, you know, we know this. You know, my book coming up. I spoke a lot about that. Where I talked about the African people moved, they traded, They married. They built kingdoms, the kingdom of Benin, their kingdom of the Ashanti tribe. There's the one in Mali,
even the Zulu kingdom,
language.
even the Zulu kingdom. And where do they originate from, those Zulu? They originated from Northern Africa. They are descendant of the people of the people actually from Nigeria and everywhere. Those people originated from there. And today they want to chase people saying that they're for.
And the funny thing is, during that period, they formed communities across regions. So the border we now call countries were largely drawn in the Berlin Conference we talked about by colonial powers, not by the African people. We did not agree for them to draw the map and say, okay, this is what we want. And we did not even agree for them to even mix the Congo, Brazzaville, and Congo, Kinshasa. We did not even agree. You know what I mean? I know that there are a lot of times, there are a lot of things that they've done, that the colonialists have done, all right? So, and I don't want to even start putting that. I just want to put point on this particular colonialist gospel that was spread and is still being spread by even some of the African people sometimes, right? I will call it the Stockholm syndrome, whereby you've been oppressed so much that you fall in love with the oppressor, all right? So now, knowing that all the maps, not all, most of the maps, because I know South Sudan decided to leave Sudan or, something like that. So, but the thing is, most of the maps in Africa today were drawn by the colonial powers. So it begs to me sometimes when I see African attack another African because of a passport. So we must ask this question: whose map are we defending? Is it the map shaped by the people or the map designed by the colonialists?
Good question.
And the fact that, one thing I always say is, if you look at what the colonialist system did, the impact is still being felt in Africa today. Because they divided Africa into for European control. So we have the Anglo, we have the Franco, and we have some of the Portuguese. They were able to take some part of Angola and one of the Guineas, all right? Now, they divided because of Nigeria was a trading company.
Was built as a company.
As a company, they never had the identity of the people in mind. So it's very, very interesting that they never thought about ethnic groups. They never thought about who the people are. They just met everybody together because they want to build borders for their own trade route. So now, another thing is, if you look at those periods, people who were historically connected suddenly became foreigners to one another. Like people from Lagos, Nigeria, speak Yoruba. People from Benin, Cotonou, speak the same Yoruba. They're the same people. But guess what? We don't have the same passport. So you can call this guy speaking the same language like you a foreigner. It's never been heard of. And that one can call you a foreigner just because of a passport. And that's why it's painful when Africans treat other Africans as outsiders. Because many of these borders were not designed to unite us. They were designed to manage us, not only manage, control, which is even worse. And the worst part of it is extract from us. So one thing I want to, especially in this case of the word colonialism, in regards to xenophobia or giving birth to xenophobia, I want you to understand that we inherited borders. While we inherit these borders, we must not inherit the hatred that came with them. Because borders sometimes come with hatred. And now, let's even look at the colonial economies. The economies was built, because I know you mentioned about economics. It was built to make African nations self-sufficient. That's what people say, but it's a lie. They were never built to make us self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient, yeah.
That's why anytime they say Africa is backward, we are not backward. We have smart people, but the economies, the surface is connected to the French franc. Like the economies, most of the Francophone countries, not all, They are connected to the French currency. So the connection of these economies is what is slowing Africa down, especially the Francophone. They were built to extract raw materials and send wealth outward, not to build self-sufficiency. That's why I was watching a video of one guy called Speed. He went to Botswana, or one of those Southern Africans, and he told them, what if I want to buy this diamond? He said, no, we don't sell diamond to anybody, not even the people here. We only sell it for a particular corporation. So even the people of the cannot even benefit from the diamond on their land. It has to be sold to some people. So now, a lot of people say we are independent now. You have grown, you can move on with your life. So the thing is, after independence, many African countries inherited economies that were automatically weak, dependent, non-equal. So today, unemployment, it's not an excuse. And I mean, this is not even the context of the word. But when we talk about housing difficulty, services are poor, people are frustrated, when all these things happen, because the system is meant to still bully them, they turn against not the oppressors, they turn against vulnerable persons. They look, okay, who is vulnerable here? Not the Africanese, the African, the whites, South African. They are not the problem to them. The problem is this guy like me, but he's from Congo. This guy like me, but he's from Nigeria. That guy like me, but he's from Ghana. That is the problem. But the real problem is not the migrants. The real problem is the economic structure we inherited.
Exactly.
And also the leadership, because leadership is very important too. Leadership failures that have allowed those structures to continue to be the same way. The Chinese, they have their own languages. They have their own curriculum. They don't follow the British curriculum or the French curriculum. Most African countries still follow the British, French curriculum. I'm sure I can guarantee in Congo, their university, they don't have their own curriculum. They follow curriculum done in French. I mean, when I mean French, France curriculum. In Nigeria, it's a big thing. We follow the British curriculum, we follow the American curriculum. We don't have our own that is built for our system.
Yeah,
Chinese have their own,
identity.
Japanese have their own, Indians have their own. But we are still following. Even our barristers, our lawyers are still wearing the British wig. Even America is throwing away the wig and saying, no, we don't want this. A barrister, like an attorney in America, does not wear all those wigs. But in Nigeria, they're still wearing. I don't know if it's the same in the Congo, but a lawyer in Nigeria, Ghana, they wear the same. We are still connected. It's like we've gotten to that point that we don't have no power anymore. We don't even know what we are doing until we get to that point and disconnect ourselves, disconnect ourselves from colonialist mentality. That's when we'll become great. And that's one thing African Coalition for Development stands for. We need to develop intellectual minds because we need to free our minds from the colonial shackles. And that's one thing I tell. So now to end the matter about talking about colonialist contribution towards xenophobia, all right, before we move to another view of what's happening exactly, one thing I want you to understand is xenophobia, depending on what definition you call it. My own definition is xenophobia is poor people fighting poor people while the system that created that poverty remain untouched. So if you are thinking about people taking your job, your educational system having problem, that Ghanaian guy is not your problem. Your leaders are your problem. Because most times they flew into South Africa, they get the right permit. They do all the studies. So the problem is not you. It's not that, that other foreigner, that black African from Ghana or wherever. It's your leaders should be held responsible for poverty. Now, if you decide, before I finish that part, If you decide to say, okay, all Nigerians leave, we tried it before. It's a shame I have to say this. Nigerians tried this before. We sent a lot of Ghanaians packing. That's why there's a bag called Ghana Must Go. I'm sure you're hearing this. Are you hearing this for the first time? For the first time, we sent Ghana out of Nigeria many years ago. We packed their bag and said, get out. Ghana must go. And Ghana, they did leave. And guess what? They went to go and rebuild Ghana because they had no choice. We packed their bag. So it was a bad time for Nigeria. And did that make Nigeria change anyway? No. Did we learn from it? Yes. If you go to Nigeria now, nobody cares where you're from because we learned a valuable lesson there. So if you're Congolese and you go to Nigeria, nobody cares whether you're Congolese or whatever. They don't care. They don't even ask where you're from because they don't care. They are more concerned about if you're Igbo or Yoruba, Hausa, than whether you're from any other African country. They don't really care.
Internal issue.
Yes. We learned a big lesson by sending the Ghanaians out of Nigeria. And we said, never again are we going to put ourselves into that situation. Because that lessons we learned that year, because Ghanaians were the one doing all the jobs. Nigeria became too proud. I can't do this job. It's below me. Even most of the construction job we have in Lagos, Nigeria today, most of them are from Benin. Benin Republic. They can't do the work and go back to Benin. But Nigerians have learned that lesson, so they really don't care about that anymore because they understand that you're my brother. So now, what I just want to say is, when Africans themselves, when they fight Africans, guess who win? Colonialism again. Not because colonial powers are physically ruling us, but because the mindset of division is still ruling us. And that's what they want Africa to inherit from them. And that's the only thing that would make Africa never, ever, ever to rise again. All right? Because if you look at apartheid itself, I just want to put the last case there. In South Africa, the apartheid was a system that legally divided people. They divided people. They control movement. You can't even move from point A to point B without a small passport like that. They had this paper that you have to take a permission to go to another state. They restricted opportunity and they even taught hierarchy. The same thing they did in Rwanda. That's the same hierarchy. So if you are this tribe, you are better than this or whatever. They did it. Divide and rule.
Yeah. That's crazy.
It told people where they could live, work, study, and belong. So we must understand that South Africa is still healing. You know, if we still look at it, they're still healing from a deeply violent history, which started in 1990. I think it was they got their independence in 1994, if I'm right. So, but healing as an excuse cannot mean transferring that same pain into or onto other Africans. And if they now say they are pushing for division, get back to your country, you don't belong here, it's a bad thing. Because a people or the people who survived apartheid should understand better than anyone the danger of declaring another human being unwanted. They should understand the pain, how they felt when they were nobody, when the African continent as a whole stood behind Nelson Mandela. This helped send fund to the ANC. Finally, one thing I want us to know that when history is missing, unity becomes weak. As a matter of fact, if you're listening to this right now, go to African Dev, www.africandev.org, and join the movement right now. You need to join the movement. It's more join the African Coalition for Development movement. That's how we're going to take our continent back. Join right now. We need to join. We need to talk. They want us divided. I'm Nigerian. I'm wearing Zambian cap. He is Congolese. And we have a lot of people. We have Kenyan, we have Ugandan in the organization. So it's time for us to take back the continent. So I'll just pick my submission for at least for now.
Definitely. That was powerful. So powerful. The divide and conquer rule. I was just thinking about it and see how we still fall into that trap that they've divided us. They continue to dividing us, and that's what makes us becoming weaker instead of being stronger. As you said as well, we have huge structural problems with our economic structure and our economic policy. We operate in an economic model that was designed by certain people for certain objectives. And the bad thing is that we've adopted it as our rational economic model, and we've completely ignored our identity, our quest, and our potential. And that's why we continue to being used under the same economic structure, which is extraction. They use our continent as a continent of extraction instead of being a continent of power and innovation. And the matter of fact is that as Africans, we don't play our role as well completely because we've entered into the new economic model. We've decided to adopt it as ours, but it doesn't really benefit our population. That's why we keep complaining about the issue of poverty. It's just inadequate for us to continue functioning with models that do not put our people at the center of everything. We work to meet the standard of the economic structure that has been established instead of working to meet the structure of lifting our people out of poverty and using whatever means, whatever tools we want. So we need to reclaim our sovereignty economically. And how do we do it? It's by using what we have. Africans need to start utilizing our mineral resources. We need to start building locally. People need to start investing more. And those are some of the objectives ACD is pushing for, because there's no economic freedom without economic liberation. Kwame Nkrumah used to say it as well. People will never be free until they're economically liberated. And we need to liberate our people economically. Africa is rich, but how comes we still have the number of the poorest population and our regions are devastated by war? We don't produce guns, but yet we kill each other with brutal wars, civil unrest all the time. We produce natural resources, but yet our kids don't have a seat to stay in school. It doesn't make any sense. There's something that is malfunctioning, and we cannot continue to repeat the same historical mistakes we've been repeating since the 1960s. Our founding fathers, they have an ideal vision of Africa. We've completely went on the opposite way. And I think that as African Coalition for Development, we need to push for that ideal, because Africans are Africans because of their identity first. Everything else has to be built on our identity, not on other people's agenda or interest within our African continent, because that's the only way we can lift our people out of poverty. That's the only way we can finish this xenophobic behavior that are being created. That's the only way we can free our people from the divisions and everything. Yeah, it's a nice conversation. We keep on the conversation at the ACD. We'll keep on engaging the Africans and those who have interest to see a prosperous Africa, especially the young people. Each generation has to play its role. We shall play ours. We are playing our role with Mr. President, doing a lot, providing the platforms and everything. And so we really appreciate, and young people should take advantage of that and being part of all this, because we cannot do it alone. We need everyone to be able to change the narrative and to kind of push the ambitions a little bit forward.
Yeah. So, and just like you said, you mentioned about unity. Unity is everything we need in Africa. All right. So, because we can't do this alone, and because a lot of people mistake that and say, okay, as an African, anywhere I go, I am an African. You mistake that word. But the world does not see you like that. Being an African is meant to be being a powerful person from a land of knowledge, a nation of knowledge. But there, you go to the Middle East, they see you as poor. You go to the Asian, they see you as poor. You come to Europe, they see you as poor. Like 76 countries or 39 countries that Trump banned, most of them are African countries. All right. I mean, even in Europe, our people are dying over the river to get to Europe. They try the ocean. They take a boat and it capsize. They still treat them worse in Europe, especially in Italy. They look down on them. So we must unite for us to be great. All we need now is just that unity. We need to understand we are one people with different passports. Remember what I said earlier, colonial borders is the thing that divided the African people. but it did not erase our shared history. Even our destiny, they did not. They can't. We have the opportunity. And like I said, no African country can rise alone, just like the Europeans. They work. If they're going to fight a war, they fight together. If they're going to do anything, that's why they form NATO, they form EU, and they work together. So South Africa needs Nigeria, Nigeria needs South Africa, Congo needs Africa, Africa needs Congo. Our markets, youth, mineral, creativity, and workforce must work together. We also need to know that xenophobia will weaken our power. That's Africa's global power. Just like I mentioned earlier, the world is forming blocks. That means the EU, the ASEAN, this ASEAN, the Gulf Alliance. Africa cannot afford internal hatred. We cannot afford it. I wish we can afford it, but we can't. Because a divided Africa negotiates from weakness, through currency, through economic trade. And one thing we also need to know is migration is not the enemy. Poor governance is. There's no country that receives more. How many Africans do we even have in South Africa, which is Africa? Imagine, not compare how many Indians have moved to Canada, or how many Africans have moved to Canada, or how many Africans have moved to the USA. That many. Do you know how many they? Then US should just close and say we are taking all their jobs.
Exactly.
So people move because they are looking for safety, not because they want to take your job. Migration has been done since the ages. If you are Christian, since the day of Jesus Christ. As a matter of fact, Jesus was from this part, he went to Bethlehem because that was where it was working. A lot of people have moved from their own town to Egypt. And if you look at the stories, you see places that people have moved to Babylon, people have moved to Assyria, people have moved to many places over the years. It's not because, people only move to places that they think will favor them. They are looking for safety, opportunity, education, dignity. So the long-term solution is not violence. It is better leadership. So your leader should be the one creating that job, building that regional trade and accountable borders. So your leader should do that. So as I'm going to round up, when I talk about Africa unity, I get tired anytime I go to the United Nations or the AU and we are talking. Unity cannot only be by speeches at summits. We speak a lot. We need to unite. I get tired of all this. Then I go to the UN. That's what we talk about. We need to. It must show up in how we treat African migrants. So if the South African government is silent about this current xenophobia, then they're complicit. Because the truth is the police protecting the communities. Well, I will be fair to the government. I saw a video of the police that did not allow some of them to enter a particular complex that a lot of African migrants were living. Maybe that was a good thing. So, but now, how did the government communicate this? How are they communicating to the people? Maybe having a summit, having a meeting with their people and telling them, see, listen, these people are not our problem. The solution we want to do is every 10 migrants you employ, make sure 3 of them are South Africans. Maybe that will work. How is the school teaching African history? Those are the questions we should ask. We need to be practical. So now, if the final solution will be, okay, we want a little bit of at least migration control, even if it's still African land, right? So we must always be honest. You have the right to manage your borders and enforce your law. So if someone commits a crime, the law should deal with that person as an individual. But we must never criminalize an entire nationality. We must never punish innocent African because of frustration within the system. So if I get a visa, of which I shouldn't be needing, but if I say, okay, I get a permit to live in South Africa, I should be respected because I have a valid permit. Your government gave me a permit to move to your country. So you should respect me. The only person that have the power, if they feel like they don't want to unite with me, they want to revoke it. They can revoke it and I will leave. Fine. But no individual of a country should say, I don't belong to this land because I have a permit to it. If you move to America, you have an American passport. Any other American can come to face you and say, get out of America. I have a passport already, unfortunately. You can't leave, you can't send me out. The only time it's okay for you to start the process is if I commit a crime and I'm becoming a nuisance to your environment, then it's okay. It's okay. Because I'm not adding to the continent or the country, then you can do whatever you want. So, and last but not the least, we need to know that law enforcement is the responsibilities of the state, not mobs, not whoever call. I've seen a lot of videos of vigilantes coming into a business and telling the person to move out. Is that a banana republic? We must stand against such behaviors. You can't walk into my business that I have the legal permit and tell me to walk out and told me to close my shop. What is the government of South Africa doing? Because we cannot shout Pan-Africanism at conferences and practice xenophobia in our communities. Because the real enemy is not the African migrant. The real enemy is poverty, unemployment, corruption, weak systems, and even failed leadership. If Africa keeps fighting Africans, just like I said earlier, the world will keep negotiating with us from a position of weakness. My closing statement, I just want to say, I know I've said many times like I'm about to, but it just gets into my heart. My message is simple. South Africa is a great African nation. I mean, I think the second largest economy or third, I'm not sure.
Second.
So they have great resources. The people are great people. I know some South Africans, great minds, even here in New York City. And the fact that South Africa is a great African nation is not just alone. They have a powerful liberation history with Nelson Mandela. But greatness comes with responsibility. The same continent that stood with South Africa during apartheid is asking South Africa today to stand with African dignity. And we must condemn crime. Yes, anybody doing drugs, whatever it is, should be dealt with. But we must enforce immigration laws. It's okay. You can do it. Yes. We must reject hatred. Yes. We must reject mob action because that's the important part of it. And we must reject and throw away the dangerous idea that another African is the cause of our suffering or their suffering in Africa or in South Africa. Africa's future will not be built by xenophobia. It will be built by unity, trade, shared security, youth opportunity, and leadership that understand that our destinies are connected. We are not Nigerians. We are not even Congolese. Neither are we Zambians, Ghanaians, Zimbabweans first. We're African first. Because most times when I travel, I've been to 48 countries, and the first thing they ask me is, are you African? Or they don't ask me the country. They identify me as an African first before they want to know where I'm from. And if you forget that, we betray the generation who fought for this continent to be free. Like Kwame Nkrumah, even Nelson Mandela too.
Yeah.
We betray their trust. So that's how I'm going to end for today. And thank you for your time. And I really appreciate it. Over to you, the great man himself.
Thank you, Mr. President. Such a powerful insight. As you said, we are Africans and Africa is our business. We are Africans and South Africa is our business too. So thank you so much for that great contribution. And we look forward to the next conversation with the Pan-African Half Hour Show. Thank you.
All right.